more the pain, the visuals. I mean, everybody, remember the visual. You close your eyes and see them. Then all of a sudden you got anthrax, and is it a criminal event? Is it part of the overall terrorist attack? And we start scrambling immediately to deal with that. Now, fortunately, in the White House, working at the National Security Council, there were a couple of really terrific people who helped me get through that. Remember, my first day on the job was October 5th, I believe. We've had 9/11, we've had the first anthrax, and the next week or so, we've got Senator Daschle, Senator Leahy. We've got people walking around in moon suits all over the Capitol Hill. We got the poor post office, by the way, led by an incredible public servant by the name of Jack Potter. Incredible public service. He's worried about his employees. He's worried about a couple 100 million people used to getting the mail. And what have we learned in that period of less than 2 weeks? That this is an enemy that turned a commercial airliner into a missile. And we thought at the time that there was a new means of delivering a weapon, not necessarily of mass destruction, but a fatal weapon, and that's envelope and a postage stamp. You didn't need an army, you didn't need an airplane, you didn't need anything, you just needed a postage stamp and an envelope, and out you went. And so, just in that very brief period alone, and my experiences kind of highlight some of the other challenges that we had going forward, and I dare say exist even through today. And I'll just give you, just in my judgment, a quick overview. I remember right after the anthrax incident, the whole notion of information sharing. Look, let's be fair to everybody. The Cold War mentality, whether it was the CIA, Department of Justice, FBI, Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, the Cold War mentality was need to know. I remember somebody from the FBI telling a retired Marine general friend of mine who came over to work for me, and the FBI guy is probably lucky he survived, but he said, I'll tell you when you need to know, and I'm telling you right now, you probably never need to know much. Quote unquote. So right away we saw, it wasn't that willful, but right away there was a real challenge with communication between, the Environmental Protection Agency had a role to play, Justice and FBI looking at it. Obviously this notion is from a group overseas, a terrorist group overseas that may have been responsible, as they said, for 9/11. Tommy Thompson at Health and Human Services needs to get his handle on it. I mean, there's just so many agencies, and one of the important lessons we learned there was that, and for a couple of days, there was like a cacophony out of Washington. You had different talking heads all over the place. And you really don't generate a lot of confidence as a government if you have multiple people talking about one particular subject. They're not necessarily coming at it from different directions, they're just talking about different aspects of it. So we decided after I got everybody in the Roosevelt room one night, after 4 or 5 days of this, that the epicenter of these daily conferences would be the White House, and that I wouldn't try to be the weaponization expert or the expert on anything. We would just coordinate everything through our office. And again, early lessons learned. Focal point, time of tragedy, time of crisis, one lesson, and ought to be the White House when it's that significant. During that period of time, we learned as well that the whole notion of need to, we felt we were responsible both in the White House and down the road in the department of developing a different mindset, from the Cold War mindset to a 21st century mindset. There may have been a need to know, but now you need a need to share. And as things evolved over the months and years ahead as we built the department, it was my judgment, it's a certain bias I have as governor, huge bias as governor, is that Homeland Security may be a federal agency, it is a national mission, and therefore the governors and the big city mayors and a variety of people out there, including the private sector and the academic world, have to be partners. They're not peripheral to this effort. They have to be integrated into the effort. That has and continues to be a real challenge. I think we've made enormous progress. But I will still scratch my head in disbelief and wonder what went on and who knew what before the tragedy at Fort Hood and who was communicating to whom. And it suggested to me that perhaps that notion of sharing and then acting hasn't been embedded as deeply as you want it. I know that Bob Mueller and George Tenet on a one-on-one basis had a terrific working relationship. I know they tried to drive that mindset down into their organizations, but folks, let's be again very clear about this. We're talking about a cultural change. This is an institutional change. If you've been operating that way for decades and decades, the notion you're going to flip a switch and it's going to turn from one model to another, that's just not going to happen. And so to their credit, and I think their successors, they continue to try to drive that notion to include other people in the states and local level and the private sector as part of your team, to be an integrated effort. Not only did we need to know, but Homeland Security needed to share. I took a look at the Detroit bomber. People like it or not, I felt bad for Secretary Napolitano because she had to answer all the questions. How to get on the plane? Well, what people don't understand, I'm going to say it for the 1,000th time, Homeland Security doesn't generate information. It is a consumer of information. They've got a group of intelligence analysts, but by and large, they're not out there pulling down electronic intercepts. They're not interrogating people. They consume information. And that person would have never gotten on the plane if they'd have known, if that person had been put on the list. So again, you still have this challenge, I think, with information sharing. Do I think we're doing a better job? There's no doubt in my mind we're doing a better job. Are we to the point where we can say we don't need to improve anymore? I doubt it. And again, I've been disconnected from it, but I hear and I still talk, and I still think we have some work to do. The whole question of anthrax, the detection, I still think there's a role in the private sector for technology of detection. Boy, there were plenty of hoaxes. There was a period there for, I don't know, a month or 2 months where we were getting calls all the time. And you know, after 9/11, you've got the visuals of people putting on these uniforms, walking through buildings, be they public or private, looking for anthrax spores, which occur naturally. By the way, they were obviously, we never considered them to be of such a nature that there was any national registry of who is using them either in the private sector or the university sector for research purposes. And so you had this whole, again, these first 2 or 3 months, all these things going on. It's no wonder, frankly, I think it, in my mind, proved America, while we were anxious, there's a lot of uncertainty, we're still pretty resilient under those circumstances. We weren't sure what direction we were going to move. But I think during those first 2 or 3 months, in spite of all the anxiety, I think we did it. We handled it very well emotionally in this country, although the scars are permanent, and we'll carry them with us. This country will carry them with us as we've done Pearl Harbor and a few others. So there are a lot of lessons learned, even in those first, that period from 9/11 through the anthrax crisis through the middle of November. I'll be happy to take this conversation any further than you want, but they asked me to just kind of focus in on that and share with you a few of the lessons learned during that particular time. Obviously, we learned a lot more as we built up the agency and started really interacting with our friends at the state level and the local private sector, the academic community. But I think I'll conclude my remarks with that. And see where you want to take the Q&A. Obviously, how long do you have? I got to turn it off someplace, and this will be it. Sir.
How is it that you began not only integrating with the domestic agencies, but the international? Can you sort of tell us how you were working and how our allies become sources of great effort?
Any other questions? Anybody have any questions? How do we coordinate with the international agencies? First of all, there are a couple of dimensions in the answer. Attorney General Ashcroft, FBI Director Mueller, DOD, their relationships obviously pre-existing anything. We were basically in a startup position way back then. Their relationships with the rest of the world were already embedded. And frankly, I think they'd all tell you they got stronger after 9/11. Even those allies who publicly weren't supportive either in Afghanistan or particularly in Iraq. The intelligence sharing was very consistent, the sharing of law enforcement information. But we had to develop a new platform. I can remember, the president, again, one of the, how do you deal with it right after 9/11? There is no blueprint. And everybody wants to ramp up security. It's the point that Charlie was making. Well, we could put a security regimen around mass transit and Amtrak that would probably reduce the risk, but you'd miss the Excella if you show up 10 minutes before, because you'd have to wait in line like everybody else. So you can only take security to a certain level. And then what I don't think the world, and I say this with great respect,